You're listening to the Young Buck Old Buck podcast, brought to you by Forest and Sky.
There we go. Heads up.
Touch him up. Dead bird. Dead bird. Get it, Sky. Get it.
Good job, buddy. Flopping.
Meh, meh.
Welcome to the Young Buck Old Buck podcast. It's your host, Daniel DeForge, and I am joined with my co-host, Old Buck himself, Bruce Smith.
Daniel,
Bruce?
how are you?
I'm rocking and rolling, man. How are you?
Good. Still fighting off this bug, but it'll pass.
Yeah, and I'm in limbo. We're actually recording this podcast quicker than usual because I am still waiting for baby number 3. And I and my wife, we leave for a conference actually tomorrow. And we're still going to the conference because the hospital is closer to the conference center than it is our house.
I hold it effect. I think she's just holding out to be at the conference for a short drive.
Yeah, I kind of predict that we won't even be there for 24 hours, and then it's going to be showtime.
Probably not.
So we're recording Saturday night. We usually record like Monday or Tuesday, so a little earlier than usual. But I am really excited and humbled, to be honest. Last episode, we mentioned maybe someone sponsoring a third microphone, and I received a message last night. I'm not ready to go into detail. I'm not ready to release anything yet. But that third microphone's sponsored, and super stoked about it. We're going to be having a conversation, and we're going to be able to get some guests on real soon.
I looked over at Cindy when you called me last night, and I said, "You are not going to believe this." She said, "What?" I said, "We have a sponsor." It's like, no way.
Yeah.
She said, "Well, you remember me when you're famous."
That's right. I know. I looked at my wife. I said, yeah, we're kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Kind of.
Yeah.
It's a key word there.
And I
Kind of.
say that completely joking.
Yeah.
The person that reached out is just an awesome dude, and it's a great company that we're looking forward to mentioning in the future. So this week's episode, though, we don't have much of an outdoors update. I did want to just touch on one thing. We went to Menards and Home Depot this morning. Honestly, it was really cold today, so just trying to get my wife walking to try to get this baby out. And I was kind of toying around with some ideas. I've been looking for something to hold arrows when I shoot. Right now, you know, I have my arrow, my quiver on my bow. Sometimes when I shoot, I just put them on a table or something next to me. I want something a little bit more streamlined. And so I went to the plumbing section. And I picked myself out. If you're not watching on YouTube, you won't be able to see what I'm holding. But Bruce, describe, because you're a construction guy, describe to the audience what I am currently holding.
That would be an inverted toilet flange. So we actually have a 4-inch toilet flange, a 4-inch chunk of PVC about 2.5 feet long, and it'll stand vertically. It's really brilliant, to be honest with you.
It cost me $15. And I have myself an arrow holder. So looking forward to that. I think I might get a piece of flat wood to screw to the bottom, so when I'm outside on grass, it will stay steady.
Yeah, you're gonna want the base bigger than that.
Yeah,
I might have a piece or 1,000 in the barn. We can hook you up.
Perfect. So yeah, there you have it, folks. Check that out on YouTube, and I might even post some links to the old Home Depot. Cost you $15, and you have an arrow holder. Bruce, do you have anything for us as far as an outdoors update goes?
Went on a big hunt this week.
Oh, boy.
I've had this apparently very old raccoon hanging around in the tree line just out of Sky's reach. And Cindy's been saying she's been seeing it during the day constantly. And the dog's just been going crazy. Mm-hmm. So yesterday, down in the basement, late in the day, and I hear the dog going wild. So I'm like, let me go look. So I go look, and here's this old coon just kind of wandering through the woods, not in a hurry to get anywhere. So I armed myself, because you don't know what kind of fight you're going to get into. Had a little walk out there, and it was just
one old guy versus another old guy.
It was old dudes tangling in the woods, yeah. And he was sick, and he was just kind of meandering around in the woods. I kind of walked right up to him. He looked at me, and I said, this might hurt me worse than you. So I dispatched him. I don't have to worry about the dog tangling with a sick coon. So big hunt of the week. And that's what we did. So, yeah, no.
I think if you actually mounted that, I think you might be single afterwards.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't have gone very well.
Awesome. Well, hey, that's our outdoors update, short and sweet, but we have some great content to talk about for our main event. So this week, we are going to be talking about our biggest Michigan bucks. Last week, we talked about our first deer. You had a nice basket 8. I had a button buck. Thankfully, since my button buck, I have improved a little bit on my biggest deer. And so I think we killed our biggest bucks in the same year. Yeah?
We did. Same area.
And I would have shot mine first, but you would have found yours first.
That's exactly how it played out.
Which, if you're listening, you're like, wait a minute, what did you just say? So it's an absolute crazy story. I typically take off November 5 through 13, if I can, to bow hunt. I feel like that is peak rut. It is prime time. We had an event at camp early November historically that kind of prevents me from taking off the first couple days in November. But this was 2023,
I believe.
Yeah, where I was able to take that stretch of days off, and I was sitting on a 20-acre parcel. This parcel butts up to a cornfield, and then to what would be to my west, I have a hay field, and then to my north, I have a swamp, and then to my east, I have more woods. And so I've had this set up for a long time. It's always had a good amount of deer come through, but this year, as I was setting up in these woods, I would see this shooter buck pretty consistently, never in bow range, but for a 3-day stretch, every single day, I saw this buck about 35, 40 yards away run past me from the cornfield down into the woods, through the swamp to an island on the swamp. And there was always a doe in the area. It was usually 3 or 4 deer that would do that same path that he did. And I just remember watching over and over again. And I was trying to figure out, man, how the heck am I going to get a shot opportunity on this buck? And I thought about moving my stand. I thought about, trying to hunt from the ground. In fact, I think I even tried to hunt from the ground once, and I had about a 28-yard encounter where he was uphill and I was downhill, and I chose not to even try to attempt a shot. He just kind of stared and he was stomping. He knew something was up, and so I went back into the tree the next day, and in the morning, I watched this buck come from the island through the woods, or through the swamp, through the woods, up the hill, into the cornfield. I'm like, dude, this is his pattern. He does that in the morning, and then the evening, he's going to come back from the cornfield and go back out into the island. And so I felt like I was really starting to get this deer's number. And I remember I watched this buck just bust through. And I remember I texted you. I said, dude, I just saw him again. And I can't believe it. I couldn't get him to stop. And what did you say in response?
I actually don't remember my quote. I'm not going to lie to you. Wait.
Yeah.
He'll be back.
Oh, yeah.
It would be something to that effect.
You said the night is young.
Yeah.
Stay still.
You would remember that.
Oh, yeah. And so I was
that
like,
was very sage advice, by the way.
Well, you get your title for a reason.
There you go.
And so I stayed in the stand, and I was like, oh, man, I just saw him again. I couldn't get him to stop. He didn't come towards me. That's probably going to be it for the evening. And then he came back from the cornfield, busting through the woods again. And he was getting ready to go into the swamp, back out into that island. And I got my grunt tube, and I just let it rip. And I will never forget this. I let that grunt tube rip, and he halted. He halted, and his head snapped right in my direction. And he just stopped. And I'm like, oh, I got him. It's kind of like, like when you got the hook in the water and you feel like a couple nibbles, right? And so I was like, I'm gonna grunt one more time just to see what happens. And I let out one more grunt. And I had camera gear up in the tree. I was prepared to film this whole thing. This dude came sprinting right at me. And let me remind you, this is the biggest deer that I have ever had an opportunity to shoot. And so I was inside kind of freaking out. I said, forget the camera gear. I'm not even trying. I'm not attempting. That's just not important right now. So he comes sprinting right at me, and he gives me a perfect, and I mean perfect, 20-yard broadside shot. It's about 6-7 minutes left of shooting light. Things have kind of gone down quickly, and I pull back, and he's at alert. He kind of knows something's up. He's not just grazing. He's looking for whoever made that grunt noise, and I let my arrow fly. And he bolts, and I see that I hit him. I hear that I hit him, and he bolts probably, 30, 40 yards, and he stops. And I watch him stop, and he's still on the property that I have permission to hunt, and then he just kind of lays down. And I am shaking at this point. Buck fever, like holy smokes. I just shot the biggest deer of my life. And I have the mount here actually to show off a little bit. This is the deer. If you can see on YouTube here, you can also look on Instagram and Facebook. The biggest buck that I'm holding is the buck that I'm currently talking about. And so I see this buck bed down, and I think I called you probably first, and you were quite pleasantly surprised. And then I called my wife and told her, and she actually had to get going for something, so she called my mother-in-law to watch the kids because she knew I was in for a longer night. And you told me, hey, listen, don't push him. Let him wait, sit, and we'll track him together. Just come to the house, and we'll track him together. So I said, great. But there was one problem. The buck was between me and my truck. So I couldn't go out that way. There was no way. And so I ended up going out the back way. I think you ended up picking me up.
You up at the top of the hill there,
yeah. Yeah, you picked me up on the other side, and you drove me back to the house. We ate some snacks. We kind of got ready for a track, and we went to the neighbor's house because we would kind of had guessed at this point that the deer was heading in that direction, and we had just wanted permission. We wanted to kind of cross our T's, dot our I's.
Well, and he's a good friend. Not a guy I would ever think of burning on that. So
yeah, for sure. And it just so happens that the property that I have permission to hunt is next to somebody that you've known for a long time from a completely different world.
Yeah, my buddy ends up living in. He was a boat rep, and he had hunted the area years and years ago. And when he wanted to move into the kind of the center of his region that he was managing, he went, oh, look around here. And he cut a deal with the lady that owned the 40 acres. And he's been out here 20 some years now. For he and I both to live over here, we knew each other from fishing days back on Lake St. Clair in the late 80s and early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's hysterical that we both ended up in.
Yeah, and so it's been a great connection. He's a great dude. So we went over there, kind of told him the story, and he's like, hey, have at it. You are welcome to track on my property. Hope you find your deer. And so we kind of got things together, got our flashlights ready, and we were walking back to the spot where we thought the buck had laid down on the corner of the property that I hunt, kind of near the edge. And as we're walking in the field with flashlights, we shine the buck, and he is not dead.
Not at all.
Not at all.
He was about 50 yards away standing up looking at us.
Yep. And so that was like a big oh crap moment. So we ended up backing out, and we gave it a couple more hours. And then we went back that same night. And we went to where that buck was lying, and we started following a blood trail, and it went right through your buddy's property and right kind of through the heart of it, to be honest. And we just kept tracking and tracking and tracking. And we found blood for probably a good 70, 80-yard stretch.
Oh, yeah.
At least. And we were on it pretty well. And then we ended up getting close to a road. And we were pushing further and further away from where we had permission to track. So we ended up backing out and just called it a night. And if you've ever shot a big buck and have not found your deer that night and have had to go to sleep, it is one of the hardest things to do ever. I mean, just knowing that an animal is out there that you've wounded and it's not dead yet, now put on, the fact that this is the biggest buck you've ever shot, and you're hoping to get your hands on it. Like, I was a mess that night. I didn't sleep a wink. Thankfully, I had the next day off. I woke up that morning and I started looking up dog trackers right away. I knew that this was probably going to be a dog tracking situation. And so I ended up getting connected. There's a dog tracker in our area. And I found his number on the dog tracker DNR page for Michigan. And I gave him a call. And I told him the area I was hunting. I told him what happened. And he said, well, I actually own property in that area, but I'm on a track and I have a couple more to do before I can even get to you. So I would recommend go out this morning, pick up blood in daylight, track it yourself, see what happens. And if you can't find your deer, let me know. Okay. So we get a crew back together, get with the property owner, who's your buddy, and he's actually helping track at this point too, kind of showing us the ropes. And we're on his property, and he actually has trail cam pictures that night of my buck walking around his property. And so we look at the pictures. He's obviously injured, and we follow blood, and we end up crossing the road. And thankfully, he knew the people that owned the property across the road. So he contacted them. He hooked us up, got us permission there. He said, okay, you guys are on your own. I have to go to work. And so it was you, me, our friend Ruben, who continued the track. And we crossed the road. We're tracking this deer. And we are on a good blood at this point. And Ruben's following good blood to another swamp edge. And Ruben is just kind of going. I'm following behind him. I have my bow in my hand. And Ruben ends up kicking up the buck again. And watching this rack jot away from you is one of the craziest and most heartbreaking things ever, right? And I am speechless of what happened next, because this buck ran through the swamp. And he didn't have much gas in him, but he was going. And you know who else was going? Ruben. This dude did not even hesitate. He snatched the bow from my hand and just started running after the deer through the swamp. He had boots, pants, the whole 9 yards on. He didn't care. He was chasing down this buck. And so he is just off chasing this deer. And here I am, and he didn't actually, he tried one arrow at it, didn't work. He was out of arrows. I needed to go get more arrows from the truck. So now he has this deer in his line of sight 25 yards away, and this buck is just out of gas. They're just staring at each other at this point. And this deer doesn't want to move. And so you're out at the road where more arrows are. I sprint over there. You're like, what's going on? I'm like, dude, you need to go and block this side of the swamp. I'm getting more arrows. I'm going through the swamp with Ruben, and we're going to go after this buck, and I'm going to shoot this buck. So then I go tromping through the swamp. I'm waist deep in water. I meet up with Ruben. He gives me my bow back. I have arrows in my hand, and I draw my bow. I am 25 yards away from this thing broadside, and as soon as I draw back, this buck jumps up, and he runs in your direction.
Sure did. He went up out of the swamp, and there's a 2-track along the cornfield on the west side there. And I'm in my truck trying to look down into that swamp to find you guys. It's so thick you can't see anything. So I'm standing there looking with the field glasses, looking, and I see movement maybe 250 feet down the road, there's like a T of this little track I'm on, and along the edge of the swamp there. And I look, and that buck walks right across the end of the trail I'm parked on. And I was like, really? And he wasn't really running. I knew he was slow. So I jump out of the truck, and I run up a hill and down through a field, and I dive into these pine trees. And I'm really not thinking about what I'm doing here. I'm just thinking maybe I could turn him back. And I hunker into a pine tree, and I'm standing there, and I got my cell phone, and the wind's blowing right on me. And I'm looking, and I know he's coming from the south, and I'm pretty sure I outran him. And I look, and I'm at about 20 yards. I see this rat coming up out of the grass, coming up this little hill right at me. I mean, he got close enough. He walked up, and I went, well, that's a pretty good deer. I could smell him.
That's crazy to me.
That's how close he got to me. So I have my Leatherman and my phone. And I'm like, I'm wondering if I could tackle him and finish him off. No. So I called Daniel and I said, I got him. He turned around and walked away from me. He didn't spook, just walked away. I said, I got him. He's right up here. And he said, where are you? And I didn't realize that I had actually hopped a little wire fence. And whose property was I standing on, Daniel?
You were standing on the dog tracker's property, who said he hunted in that area.
Right in his backyard.
So we quickly backed out. I mean, you backed out as soon as you realized that you were across the line. You backed out. We kind of regathered on the road. I onyxed who owned the property. I saw the name and was like, no way. There is no way. I tried calling his number. He didn't answer. I white paged the property again. I got his wife's number. I talked to her, told her the story. She's like, listen, go get your deer. I'll talk to him. I'll let him know what's happening later, but go get your deer. The fact that I talked to this guy that morning about the same situation, what happened, that he was the dog tracker that was maybe going to come out in the afternoon, absolutely mind-boggling. So we're after him because at this point, that buck was gassed. I mean, he had nothing left in the tank. We just kept pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. And so we tried picking up blood on this piece of property, and we lost it pretty quick. And we kind of did a grid search a little bit, and we just did not find anything. We had 4 people searching on that property. We didn't have much blood, and at that point, it just kind of felt like we were doing a deer drive. And I just wasn't cool with it, to be honest.
No, we felt like we were just pushing them.
Yeah, and it was the rut. A lot of people are hunting in the area, and here we are. We're just tromping over everything, and I wasn't really cool with it anymore. And so I looked and said, hey, guys, we got to call it quits. Let's back out. I was heartbroken, absolutely sick to my stomach. I connected with the property owner later and just said, hey, last we knew he was on your property. If you find anything, please let me know. So that kind of closed the chapter. And again, I didn't have this deer in possession. I thought it was over. And I didn't know what was going to happen next. And that weekend, I ended up going to Ann Arbor for a Michigan football game, so I couldn't get back in the tree. I never saw the deer back on camera. And again, I just kind of thought it was over until my phone rang, and it was November 18th. I will never forget that date. And lo and behold, it was the property owner, the dog tracker, in which we stopped tracking for the deer. And he called me, and I didn't answer because I didn't feel great. So I just kind of let it go to voicemail, and I didn't recognize the number. And I remember letting it go to voicemail. Immediately, I check my voicemail, and he says, hey, Daniel, I found your buck. Call me back. And I was shocked, absolutely wrecked. I don't think I could pick my phone up fast enough to call him. I call him back right away. My voice is cracking. I'm like on the edge of tears. And he's like, yeah, I'm standing with it right here. Like, I found it. And I was just, no way. He turns out he went duck hunting. And after he was done duck hunting, he was walking up from a body of water. And as he was walking up, he sees this rack just resting there. And it turns out it's my buck. And so he's like, hey, why don't you come tomorrow, get the deer, we'll connect, whatever. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever, sounds good. I was kind of bummed it was going to take me so long. And then he calls back and goes, you know what? Actually, I have time tonight. I'm like, I'll be right there. No hesitation. Like, I'm there. And so I instantly felt better.
Miraculous healing.
And I just go bolting out of the house. My wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, he found my buck, and I'm just stoked. And I go out there, and sure enough, it's him without a doubt. And what absolutely blew my mind is I did not get as good of a shot on this buck that I thought I did. I didn't hit vitals. I ended up cutting the front of his arm and the front of the brisket and just sliced through all of that. The arrow didn't stick in him. I just sliced through that part, and I must have cut some major arteries or,
Well, there's one good one down through there. I mean, he bled out from his injury. So.
Yeah, and I think pushing him probably also set him over the edge a little bit.
For sure.
And so I got my hands on the deer. We dragged him up the hill, got him in the truck. You came over that night and laid eyes on him yourself. What was your first thought when you first laid eyes on him?
First, the phone call was awesome. Dude, I'm going to get my deer. And I about jumped out of my chair. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Because all I had memories of crawling through Cloverfield on my hands and knees with Reuben, finding a drop here and a drop there. So I was still reliving all that stuff. I was just blown away by the fact that the guy had found it. So I just remember pulling in the driveway, and I looked at that deer, and I was like, yep, that's the one I was standing face to face with for sure. Just a remarkable, great buck. I mean, and a great story. My gosh. We were so glad that guy found him.
Oh, yeah.
What a relief.
I could hug that guy over and over again.
Yeah. For sure.
And so the next morning, I took a tape to him, and the buck measured 137. Again, 137. And that is my largest whitetail to date. I'll never forget. This is, mid to late November at this point, and Christmas is right around the corner. I had a 2-year-old daughter. I was taping this deer first thing in the morning in the garage on the other side of the Honda, which was parked in the garage. My daughter, when she wakes up in the morning, she tries to find Dad right away. She knew I wasn't in the bedroom, so she made her way downstairs. She heard some noises in the garage, opens up the garage door, sees my head, and goes, oh, hey, Daddy, how you doing? It's like, oh, good, just measuring my deer that I found last night. She goes, oh, you shot a deer? I'm like, yeah, sure did. She goes, good job, Dad. Well, thanks, honey. And she comes walking around the Honda, and as soon as she rounds the corner, she sees the buck, and she sees the size of the wreck, and she gasps. She goes, oh, Dad, you shot Santa's reindeer. And I will never forget that moment. It makes that buck that much more special to me, to be honest, to remember that story too. But yeah, super blessed, super thankful. So by the time I took this shot to when I found the deer, I mean, we're talking pretty stinking close to 2 weeks later. The deer was in remarkable shape. It had snowed a lot and piled on top of this deer. Coyotes never got to him. He didn't reek that bad. He wasn't in bad shape at all, but loaded, and I mean loaded with ticks. There was so many stinking ticks.
It was horrible.
Oh, they were crawling everywhere. So that was the one bad part. And then I have a deer friend who does Euro mounts and hooked me up, and so I got the deer Euro mounted, and that was kind of the deal with my wife to be able to hang it in the living room. So that's the story. That's the 137, my biggest Michigan whitetail. And next week, we're going to talk about your biggest buck. And it's kind of fun because these stories intermingle. So stay tuned for next week because we're going to get into that. But for now, we're going to jump to segment 3, which we love talking about, what the Lord's teaching us and doing in our life. And you have something for us this week.
So for 3, Daniel had asked me if I had any ideas about what to go over tonight. And I had a couple, but I hit on Galatians 5, just the first verse. I wanted to kind of stay with that because I think it's a lot. So Galatians 5, verse 1 says, "For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Amen to that. He has set us free. He set us free from an eternity in hell, the damnation that we actually deserve. And for that we need to give him thanks. So I did a little dive into commentary because I wanted to see what somebody else might have had to say about it. And I love the thought, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Freedom to not be bound to the slavery of sin. But you still have to do the work. You got to stay in the faith. It's not like you get saved and you just live your life any way you want. We're called to live a life that glorifies Christ.
Yeah, some people can use the forgiveness and the work of the cross as kind of a get out of jail free card, a free pass. Oh,
yeah, once that's done.
Yeah, that's already been paid for. I can do what I want.
Exactly. And I've encountered a lot of people like that over the years, and I'm like, I can't judge. I can't. It's not my position, not my place.
But that's genuine repentance versus false repentance.
Exactly.
And I want to spend a whole nother episode on that.
Yeah, we could probably burn a whole cast on that.
Yeah.
So in my little bit of a study here, I came across a D.L. Moody illustration. He used a quote from an old slave back in the day. She was very confused about her status after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. She didn't understand. And the quote's amazing. It says, and I'm going to read it verbatim, "Now is I free, or ben I not? When I go to my old master, he says I ain't free. And when I go to my own people, they say I is. And I don't know whether I'm free or not. Some people told me that Abraham Lincoln signed a proclamation, but master says he didn't, that he didn't have any right to." The analogy here is, it's pretty black and white. The devil's going to tell you, Christ has nothing for you. Stick with me. I'll give you a life, whatever you want, fun and games and carefree, whatever. But he's guaranteeing an eternity in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Acceptance of Christ, you get the salvation. Because of the blood of Christ, we can live in eternity with him.
Amen. Yeah, and what I love about this verse as well is, the end of that verse says, "And do not submit again to a yoke of slavery." And hearing that word yoke makes me think of another verse, and it's Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. And this is Jesus talking, and he says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me. For I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light."
Amen.
And so I just love that picture of, take off the chains of slavery to sin and pursue Jesus and take his yoke upon you. And you and I both know the Christian life is not an easy life. It does not mean when you become a follower of Christ, it does not mean life gets easier. But you're not doing it alone, but you're doing it with the person who's already victorious.
Amen to that. I would submit it sometimes gets tougher.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. Sometimes you just want to throw in the towel.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really not worth it.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for listening this week and following along. And we are super thankful for you guys. We're thankful for the way that you're sharing the podcast, the way that you're engaging with us. Please keep it up. Like, subscribe, hit that share button, turn on notifications, download. It all helps us, and we will catch you next week. And who knows? I may have a baby in my arms.
Y'all need to be praying for the DeForge family this week as they await the birth of a new baby.
Awesome. Catch you next week, guys.